The explosion came from the left flank, a concussive blast that tore through the thin atmosphere of Traxis, 4/3 moon, and sent gravel and pressurized soil flying in all directions. Garrett Tolan hit the ground hard, his helmet slamming into the rock. His ears rang inside the sealed suit, and for a split second, he couldn't tell if it was his own blood pounding or the comm system freaking out. "Garrett? Garrett, respond," came Ziara Dern's voice in his headset, sharp with panic. He groaned and rolled onto his side, teeth clenched. Pain knifed through his left leg as he tried to move it. "Still here," Garrett grunted. "Something blew under the crawler. I think it hit the stabilizers." "I'm coming to you," Ziara said. "No, don't. The ground's unstable." "Wait for the drones." The wind howled across the open plain, stirring up silver-gray dust, and Garrett pulled himself up just enough to look back at the crawler, or what was left of it. The front half of the six-wheeled vehicle had been sheared off by the blast, flames licking out from the twisted metal. Smoke curled around the wreckage, and he could see the charred remains of the mapping unit. The rest of the science team was either inside the rear compartment or already out on the field. Movement to his right caught his eye. The alien medics had arrived, 3 of them, tall and willowy, amphibian-skinned and wearing sleek metallic suits that hummed faintly. They moved with a grace Garrett had never gotten used to, like they weren't really touching the ground. One of them carried a case the size of a microwave oven, its surface covered with blinking blue lights and embedded tools that looked more like dental torture devices than medical instruments. "Stay still," the lead medic said in clipped standard, leaning in with a scanning wand. "You may have sustained multiple fractures. We must begin neurovascular stabilization immediately." "I've got a first aid kit," Garrett said, grimacing as he fumbled with the latch on the side of his suit. "We're fine." The alien froze as if its neural pathways had short-circuited. "Explain," it said. "I mean, I've got gauze, antiseptic, splints," Garrett said. "You know, first aid, human stuff. You are bleeding internally." "Probably," Garrett admitted. "But I can feel my toes and I'm not seeing double. That buys us some time." The medic exchanged a glance with the others, though they didn't speak. Ziara's voice came through again. "Garrett, status? Alive. Legs messed up." "Got the medics here, but I told them to hold off." "You what?" "I've got the kit." "You are not patching yourself up with a field bag. I'm not alone," Garrett said. "You'll be here in 5 minutes. By then we'll know if I need evac." The alien crouched beside him again, scanning his femur. Garrett winced as the wand buzzed. "Fracture confirmed. Midshaft femur displaced. You will not walk on it." "No kidding," Garrett muttered. The medic raised one of its long arms, activating a tool that looked like a miniature jackhammer with a needle on the end. "Wait," Garrett said. "What is that?" "Stabilization probe," the alien replied. "There's no anesthesia in that thing." "Correct. We neutralize pain receptors after insertion." "Nope, no way, give me the splint." "Ziara's bringing the rover. You are delaying treatment." "I'm managing risk," Garrett said, already opening the first aid kit from his side panel. "You punch something into my leg and it goes wrong, I might lose the whole thing." "We do this my way." The medic hesitated again, then slowly retracted the probe. "This is inefficient." "You're not wrong," Garrett said, wrapping a pressure bandage around his thigh. "But welcome to humanity." By the time Ziara arrived with the second rover, gravel crunching under thick tires, Garrett had already packed his leg with foam, strapped it tight, and was propped on a folded data case for support. Sweat beaded inside his helmet, and he was pale, shaking, but upright. Ziara climbed out, her eyes wide when she saw the medics standing back. "You really did it," she said. "You told them no." "They wanted to drill into my leg," Garrett said. With a glowing spike. "You broke your femur." "Yeah, you stabilized a femoral fracture by yourself. Not my best Tuesday." Ziara crouched to check the wrap. "You didn't even get a painkiller in there. Didn't want to risk masking nerve damage." "Figured I'd wait for the proper med bay." She looked over at the medics. "He needs a vac." "Confirmed," the lead alien said. Human intervention has delayed optimal response window. Recommend immediate transfer. I'm right here, Garrett muttered. You're not arguing anymore, Ziara noted. I'm tired, he said, and I think I'm gonna puke. They loaded him into the back of the rover, careful not to jostle the leg. Garrett sucked air through his teeth the whole way, biting down on the urge to scream. The alien medic monitored vitals silently from the front seat, its expression unreadable. Back at Base Point 1, the human med team took over. Garrett was lifted onto a gurney, scanned, and confirmed to have a clean transverse femur break. The orthopedic lead doctor, Haley Varn, glared at him as they sedated him for surgery. You know we have protocols for this, she said. Wasn't sure yours were better than the aliens, Garrett mumbled. You're lucky you didn't sever an artery. Luck's kind of my brand. He was under before he could hear her reply. Recovery was brutal. 6 weeks in a pressure-adjusted recovery pod, followed by another 4 in physical therapy. Garrett couldn't put weight on the leg until the bone had fused well enough to tolerate strain. He used crutches, then a walker, then finally a brace. Every step was agony at first. But he didn't complain. Not once. The alien medic, its name translated loosely to Tolnar, visited once during the 2nd week of recovery. It stood silently by the door of the rehab unit, watching as Garrett struggled through a balance test. You have healed slower than projected, Tolnar said. Yeah, well, humans don't regrow limbs, Garrett grunted. Takes time. You refused superior intervention. I didn't trust it. Even in pain, you delayed treatment, Garrett glanced over. I wasn't being brave, I was being careful. Tolnar tilted its head. We do not understand why you would choose a less efficient method. Because sometimes less efficient means safer. Your leg could have been repaired in under 90 minutes, and I might have lost it if something went wrong. Tolnar was quiet for a long moment. Then it said, we assumed you were reckless. I am, Garrett said, but not about my own bones. Ziara passed by then, catching the end of the conversation. She raised an eyebrow and smiled faintly. Is he giving you a lecture about risk management? She asked. He is explaining fear. Garrett laughed once, then winced. It's not fear, it's experience. Difference? Fear stops you from acting. Experience tells you when not to. Tolnar seemed to consider that. When Garrett was finally cleared to return to field duty 3 months and 2 days after the blast, he was assigned to a new mapping team, this time with reinforced crawler plating and a secondary safety unit trailing behind. Ziara saw him off from the launch platform. You sure you're ready? I've got a medical tag the size of a dinner plate and a backup team checking my vitals every hour, Garrett said. I think I'm good. And the leg, he tapped the brace under his pant leg. Steel reinforced, I'm basically part rover now. Ziara nodded. Try not to blow anything up this time, no promises. As the crawler lifted off, Garrett looked back through the side window. Tolnar stood near the base, watching silently again. Garrett raised a hand. The alien returned the gesture. On the data log for the mission, under emergency response protocols, a new note had been added. In the event of traumatic injury, confirm patient consent before alien intervention. Humans may prefer primitive but familiar methods. Do not assume inferiority. Adaptation is not always optimization. Garrett never saw Tolnar again, but on every field assignment after that, he brought 2 things: his scanner and his first aid kit. The crawler's interior hummed with quiet energy as it glided across the cobalt plains of Traxis 4. Garrett sat in the navigator's seat, one leg braced straight, the other bent comfortably, his boots resting on the worn edge of the floor panel. The new team, 2 humans and a trio of Lazanarians, kept mostly to their own rhythms. Not out of tension, but because Garrett had a presence like an old piece of field equipment. Familiar, slightly dented, and not to be messed with unless you had a good reason. Keta, the senior Lazanarian analyst, adjusted the spectral scanner mounted to the dashboard. Her 4-fingered hand moved fluidly over the panel's glowing interface, occasionally flicking her inner eyelids in thought. You increased the rover's suspension clearance by exactly 4 centimeters, she said without turning. That is not regulation. Garrett glanced at her, then shrugged. Regulation didn't hit a shrapnel crater at 30 clicks an hour. Ketta's gills fluttered once, a gesture usually reserved for mild surprise. Modifying a government-issued transport without authorization is typically discouraged. You know what's discouraged even more? Dying because of a design flaw nobody filed a report on. You did not file a report. Oh, I filed something, Garrett said. Mostly drawings of how the stabilizers exploded like party confetti. Ketta's companion, a smaller Lazanarian named Jorik, let out a low, watery trill that Garrett had learned was the species version of a laugh. They drove in silence for a while, the crawler's long treads crunching over fragmented mineral deposits. The horizon shimmered with heat haze despite the moon's cold. Garrett tapped at his wrist console, checking vitals. His oxygen saturation was fine, skin temp a little low. Leg ache hovering around a 6. Are you refusing the analgesics again? Ketta asked. Not refusing, Garrett said. Just rationing. You ration medication. I like knowing when something's wrong. Pain's useful. Ketta looked at him, actually looked this time. That is not a typical human sentiment. It's not a sentiment. It's what works in the field. Jorik leaned forward from the rear bench. You corrected your own femoral displacement with no anesthetic. That is incorrect behavior. You say that like I wanted to. You could have been unconscious. Would have been a real short survival story if I passed out in the middle of an unstable crater. There was a short pause. Then Ketta said, you continue to operate with degraded physiological metrics. Degraded's a bit harsh. I am reading a 12% reduction in muscle density on your left leg. Still beats the alien's glowing bone drill. Jorik cocked his head. The probe is not a drill. It looked like a drill. It uses harmonic vibration to realign still. Drill. The crawler's dashboard pinged. Ketta flicked the alert open. Subsurface instability ahead. Tectonic shearing. Garrett leaned forward. We're not even in the fault zone. Apparently the fault zone has moved. Great. They slowed to a crawl, the crawler's sensors sweeping the terrain. Shards of crystallized rock jutted at odd angles from the ground, some of them still shifting, like the moon itself hadn't decided what shape to take yet. Doesn't match the last survey, Ketta muttered. Garrett keyed up the older terrain maps. We're off by over 100 meters. No way our positioning's that off. It is not. The ground moved. Jorik climbed into the front with them, gripping the overhead bar. This region was previously dormant. Not anymore, Garrett said. Should we backtrack? Ketta hesitated. If we can place a seismic probe, we might predict the next shift. All right, I'll get the casing. They parked on the edge of a tilted rise, the crawler's auto-levelers groaning as they adjusted. Garrett pulled the probe case from the undercarriage storage and stepped out. The wind was sharp, flicking dust at his visor. Every step on the uneven terrain made his leg twinge, but he kept his gait steady. Ketta followed with the calibration node. You do not favor the leg, she observed. Garrett didn't look back. Favoring it makes it weaker. You could still be healing. I am healing, that's why I'm walking. You do not use regenerative scaffolding. I don't trust it to stick. That's not rational. Neither was drilling a hole in my thigh. Ketta's eyelids twitched again. The procedure has a 97% success rate. It's the 3% I didn't like. They reached the edge of the ridge and dropped to one knee. Garrett set the probe in the soil, then began unfolding the stabilizers. You know, he said, I didn't expect to be arguing about medical decisions with aliens a season after nearly losing a leg. You argue often, he grinned. Keeps me flexible. They planted the probe and synced it to the crawler's interface. The screen showed a slow, pulsing rhythm subsurface tension building like a held breath. We should go, Ketta said. Agreed. They turned to leave and the ground lurched, not a quake. A ripple. Like the surface had turned to water for a moment, then back again. Garrett stumbled, caught himself, and cursed. Crawl now, he shouted. They ran awkwardly over shifting ground. Keta moved with eerie balance, her feet adjusting without thought. Garrett's brace caught on a rock and he fell hard, his left leg folding under him at a bad angle. Pain flared sharp and hot. "Leave me," he said through clenched teeth. "Do not be absurd," Keta said, already pulling him upright. Garrett's face was pale behind the visor, sweat dripping down his temple. "I can't put weight on it. I will compensate." She slung his arm over her shoulder and half-carried him the remaining 20 meters. Jorik met them at the hatch, opening the crawler just as another ripple passed under their feet. This one cracked the ridge behind them. Segments of rock fell away like broken tiles. Inside, Garrett collapsed into the bench, breathing hard. "What's the damage?" he asked. "Ligament strain," Keta said, scanning his knee. "Possibly a micro-tear, not a break." "No, good." Keta looked at him. "You are not fainting. I'm not 12. Your pain threshold is abnormal, I've been told." She retrieved a small injector from the med kit and pressed it to his arm before he could protest. "Low dose," she said. "You will not lose awareness." Garrett exhaled and leaned back, his leg propped on a folded blanket. "Thanks." Jorik peered over. "Would you like assistance removing the brace? Only if you're good with Velcro." "Velcro," Keta began unfastening the straps. "Primitive clasping system." "Human?" "Ah, the noisy binders." Garrett chuckled, then winced. "Yeah, those." They resecured the joint and scanned for further damage. The readings stabilized. Garrett's vitals returned to baseline, though his leg throbbed with a low, persistent ache. "Next time," Keta said, "you should allow me to carry the probe." "Next time," Garrett said, "I'll let you carry me. We are not configured for that. You did fine." The crawler began moving again, slowly skirting the unstable zone. Outside, the ridge had partially collapsed, leaving jagged outcrops jutting like teeth. Garrett watched them fade into the distance. A few hours later, they reached the temporary station dome. It inflated with a soft hiss, and they entered the airlock. Inside, the walls flickered with telemetry from the seismic probe. Garrett sat on the lower bunk, unwrapping his knee. Keta stood over him. "You are stubborn. You keep saying that. Because you continue to demonstrate it." He nodded. "It's how we make it through." She looked at him for a long moment. Then, "You did not cry out." Garrett raised an eyebrow. "Would it have helped?" "No." "Then why waste the energy?" Jorik entered, carrying 3 rations. He handed Garrett a pouch. Garrett sniffed it. "Is this the one that tastes like mushroom regret?" "It is the least offensive," Jorik said. Garrett took a bite and made a face. "You have a cruel definition of least offensive." They ate in silence, the hum of the dome the only background. Later, Garrett lay back on the bunk, leg elevated, eyes half-lidded. Keta sat at the console, her back to him. "You may rest. I will monitor the tremors." Garrett didn't reply immediately. Then, "You ever get used to watching things fall apart?" "No," he nodded. "Same." The dome lights dimmed slightly, cycling to rest mode. Outside, the moon's surface shifted again silently. But inside the dome, it was calm. For now, the rain on Traxis 4 wasn't water, not really. It was a misting of metallic particles suspended in vapor, falling in slow, soundless sheets that coated everything in a dull sheen. The dome's outer shell repelled it with a soft, almost contented hum, like a cat purring in its sleep. Inside, Garrett adjusted the elastic bandage around his knee and grunted as the joint resisted. The swelling had finally begun to subside, but the stiffness clung like a grudge. He was perched on the dome's lower step, one boot off, calf resting on a folded ration wrapper stuffed into a sling for elevation. Jorik sat opposite him, legs crossed, a stack of mineral samples balanced in his lap. "That one's got pyrozine," Garrett said, pointing with a capped stylus. Jorik rotated the shard. "I had not considered that. We assumed it was feldspar. Too green. Feldspar doesn't show that tint unless it's been cooked. Pyrozine glows like that when it's low in calcium. You analyze through color alone? Sometimes smell too, but that doesn't fly with the geology board." Jorik tilted his head. "What does calcium smell like?" like wet sidewalk after heat lightning. But only if it's fresh. Keta entered from the rear airlock, her suit sealed, visor beaded with condensation. She walked with the same fluid motion as always, but Garrett noticed a slight tension in how she carried the sample case slung over her shoulder. "Any luck?" he asked. "Negative." "The rise has collapsed further. We won't retrieve the probe." "Figures." Keta placed the case near the console and knelt beside it, opening compartments with quiet efficiency. She laid out a set of discs and narrow cylinders, then paused. "Why is your leg uncovered?" "Air circulation," Garrett said. "Keeps the tissue from getting clammy." "You removed the compression wrap, temporarily. You are supposed to alternate elevation and compression every 4 hours. It's been 3.5. Keter retrieved the wrap from the floor, examined the elasticity, then handed it back. "It is still viable." Garrett looped it around his knee again. "You ever get tired of checking on me?" "I do not feel fatigue in the way you mean." "Right." She watched him resecure the wrap, her crest pulsing faintly. "Have you considered joint irrigation, flushing it?" "No." "Not unless it locks again. I'll do a cold soak before sleep." "The inflammation is impeding mobility." "I've seen worse." "That is not an argument against treatment. I've also seen it resolve without intervention." Keta didn't respond. Instead, she turned to the console and began logging the failed probe attempt. Garrett slid his foot back into his boot, wincing as the pressure settled around the joint. "Why do you persist in field work?" Jorik asked suddenly. Garrett looked up. "What do you mean?" "You are not structurally optimized. Your reflexes are average. Your tolerance for pain is high, but your tissue recovery is slow." "You are not efficient." "Neither is a shovel," Garrett said, "but it still digs better than a laser when you're planting in clay." "That is an analogy. It's a point." Jorik considered this, then resumed sorting the mineral samples. Garrett adjusted his position, leaning back against the dome wall until his shoulder touched the insulation lining. The mist outside thickened, turning the view into a swirling sheet of gray. "How long until the shuttle gets here?" he asked. Keta didn't look up. 17 hours. Enough time for a nap. You should elevate the leg properly if you intend to sleep." Garrett grabbed the ration wrapper again and wedged it under his calf. "Better, minimal improvement. I'll take it." They settled into a rhythm. Keta sorted data, Jorik cataloged samples, and Garrett rested with his eyes half-lidded, occasionally muttering corrections to Jorik's guesses or suggesting alternate mineral IDs. The dome hummed softly, its filtration system scrubbing the air with a faint ozone scent. A few hours passed. Not enough for a full sleep cycle, but enough for Garrett's body to begin that slow shift from tension to recovery. The ache in his joint dulled to a background throb. His breathing evened. The hiss of the mist outside became almost meditative. Then came the knock, hard, flat, metallic. 3 raps on the dome's outer frame, followed by silence. Keta froze mid-keystroke. Jorik dropped a sample. Garrett sat up too fast and immediately regretted it. "We weren't expecting visitors," he said. "There are no other teams within 80 kilometers," Keta replied. Garrett grabbed the portable scanner from the bench and activated its proximity sweep. The screen lit up with a single blip. Humanoid, bipedal, standing just outside the east side of the dome. "What's our airlock security?" "Manual override from inside only." "Then whoever's out there can knock all they want." Keta stood and moved to the viewport, her visor darkening as she peered through the swirling mist. Garrett limped to stand beside her. Out in the haze stood a figure. 2 meters tall, wrapped in a cloak that shimmered like oil on water. Its face was obscured by a mask with angular ridges, and it didn't move. "Do we know that species?" Garrett asked. "No." "Then I vote we keep the door shut." The figure raised a hand, palm outward. A small beacon blinked between its fingers. "Translation request," Keta said. "They're broadcasting. Let's hear it." She patched the signal through the console. A voice echoed, mechanical, clipped, distress. "Medical, request entry." Garrett narrowed his eyes. "They're hurt." "That is what the signal indicates." How convenient, Keta didn't respond. She went to the console, ran a background scan on the figure. The readings came back. Odd, no elevated body temperature, no detectable respiration, but the beacon continued to blink. Something's wrong, Garrett said, agreed. Jorik activated the auxiliary camera, zoomed in on the figure's arm. No visible wounds. I've got a bad feeling about this, Garrett muttered. Speculation is insufficient, Keta said. We must confirm. We open that door, we better be sure we can close it again. Agreed. They ran a full spectrum scan, still no signs of injury, no weapons either. The figure remained motionless. Could be decoy tech, Jorik said, or a probe, Keta added. Garrett exhaled. All right. Let's not open anything, just test the external mic. Keta activated the outboard speaker. You're requesting medical aid, identify your condition. The figure didn't move. Repeat, Keta said. What is your medical emergency? Still nothing. Then the beacon blinked once, then ceased. The figure turned and walked into the mist. They stood in silence for a moment. That was weird, Garrett said, agreed. Think we should log it? I already did. Jorik resumed stacking samples. I do not care for this moon. You and me both. Garrett sat back down, leg elevated again. The ache had returned, sharper now, and he reached for the cold pack near the supply drawer. He pressed it gently to the side of his knee, sighing as the chill seeped in. Keter resumed her data entry without comment. Later that cycle, as they prepared to rest before the shuttle's arrival, Garrett ran a final diagnostic on the brace. No stress fractures, no fluid buildup, he said. Might even be able to do stairs again. You should not attempt stairs, Keter replied. I said might. Jorik powered down the sample scanner. I hope the shuttle has no stairs. It has a ramp, Keta said. Good. They slept in shifts. Garrett dozed in 30-minute stretches, waking each time his leg twitched involuntarily. By the end of the rest cycle, the stiffness had eased slightly, and he could rotate the joint without swearing aloud. The shuttle arrived just after the mist cleared. The ramp extended, and the crew stepped out, their suits pristine and boringly human. Garrett limped aboard last, nodding once toward the dome. Leave it standing, he said. It's earned it. The ride back was smooth. Keta sat across from him, her eyes closed, skin faintly iridescent under the cabin lights. You think we'll ever get used to each other? Garrett asked. Doubtful, she said, not opening her eyes. But we adapt, he smiled to himself. I'll take that.